to the presentation of Tracardi version 0.4. The big changes are coming to Tracardi. The main change is that the backend is no longer Apache Unomi, so you have less dependencies and the whole project will be simplified. I'll show you what have changed. Okay, here we go. The whole project looks mostly the same, but there are a few changes. One change is that Unomi is no longer a backend of this project. That means that whole context server was rewritten, as well as the JavaScript that integrates with Tracardi. I've prepared a test page that shows what have changed. I refresh the page, and inside this page we have JavaScript code that's here. You have to paste your source ID, so when you create a source, for example, let's create a new source, let it be a web page, and we just mark that this source requires user consent and this source is enabled. Let's give it a name, my test page, save. Okay, this is my test page. You can see it has ID. Once I paste it into the JavaScript code here, each event will be marked with this source ID, so I can trigger events on a certain source ID. Okay. Now the second thing, we have rules. The rules in Tracardi have changed and they are much simpler. Now the rule is a very simple equation. This time you only have a simple equation. Rules looks like this. You just select an event, for example a page view. You can select or not select the source, so this is your choice, and you just give it a flow name. What's a flow? I will explain in a minute. So let's give it a general flow. Okay, name it like this. Okay, this flow will be created, and we just describe our rule test rule. So we have sources, then we have rules that trigger events that are coming to the system. Okay, let's go back to the page, the test page, and we can see that we have only one callback to send an event. It's called truck. We no longer need callbacks like identifies. We'll show you why we don't need it. We have just only one single callback called truck. We pass event and we pass this event properties. We can also bind actions to any element on the page. For example, this button has a binded event. So once I click on it, you can see the server responded and this event was sent to the server. You can just go and see it. Data events. Here we go. I have 7 new events because I've clicked several times, and we have like custom click event. And inside we have a lot of data. The data we defined is just properties, and the rest is session and context. So you can see that, for example, this click was done on this page. And you can see what kind of browser it was. There's a lot of data. You can see also a profile that was created. Now let's go back. So we have sources, rules that trigger events, and we have flows. Flow is actually a kind of logic that runs when a rule is triggered. The rule, let's go back for a while to see the flows. Let's go to count visits, and we can see that every time there is an event page view, count views, that means this flow will be run. So with every page view, this flow will run. We just go into this flow, and I'll show you how we can load the data from the event. This node will do that. We can double click on it, and we can see that it starts flow and copies events to payload. What is payload? Payload is the data that will appear on this end. It means it's the data that will appear on the output of this action. You can see that this action has output payload. its input is void, it means it takes nothing. Okay, let's try to debug it just to see if it works. To do that, we will need a debug node. It has a config tab that takes an event ID, so we can just inject this event into this flow and see how the data flows. So let's go and save this flow. Go into the events, find an event page view. So let's do it like this: type equals page view, type equals page view. Here's a page view event. I will copy this ID, and I hope all this data will be loaded into the workflow so we can debug it. Double click. Here we go. Okay, let's save it. This node, as the documentation says, loads the back payload into the flow. So it actually loads an event, and this actually is executed only in debug mode. So it will not be executed when we run it regularly. But if you want to debug it, it will just load the data and pass it to this node, and this node should return the data. So let's debug it. Go here, and we can see as we click on those nodes, we see this is the output payload. On this node, it does not return any payload, but this one returns the event data. Everything that's passed here, it's called payload, but this flow has its internal state, and inside that state it has session, profile, flow, and payload actually as well. Right now you can see only what's been passed from node to node, but the future version will also show internal state of the flow. So once we have event data, we can process it. I've come up with the idea of counting visits, so I will just increase views and increase visits. We can just read what it does. It increases view field in profile and returns profile, and this one increase visits. I will connect it, but if I connect it this way, it means that those actions will be run concurrently, because the whole process is asynchronic. These two things will run asynchronously. At the end, I want my profile to be updated. I just connect it. That means that this node will run twice, because once it goes here and once it goes here. The update profile actually will not save the data twice. It will just mark it that the profile was updated, and when the flow finishes, it will save the profile. It will run twice, but actual save will be run only once. Okay, let's save it and debug it. Okay, and yeah, as you can see, I've clicked on this node. There are two runs of this action. You can see the data. This data was coming, so you can see that there is views increased. Let's see, visits will not increase because my visits cookie did not change, so it didn't increase. So the visits and views are working. We actually should also try to simulate increase in visits, but I'll do it later. Okay, so this flow is working. I saved it. Now go back to our page and let's refresh it. And we can see our visits are going up. Okay, great. So this is how it works. And now I've removed my cookie with my session, and I will try if my visits go up. Okay, here we go. My visits just went up, and next views are just increasing and visit is not. We'll try to do it again. Let's remove my Tracardi session ID, and after the refresh, my visits should again go up. Here we go. Okay, the same. Now let's try to do something regarding collecting user properties. So we can just go into rules, create new role, and if there is a purchase order from any source, I will make another flow. Okay, here we go. Ready. Purchase order, and this is the flow. Now let's try to do something like this. We'll try to start, and then right after that, let's go and debug it. I need some event purchase order. Here we go. I need this ID just to debug this flow. Paste it. Okay. Here is my payload. This is an event. This is the purchase order event. And now I will try to add the properties of a bought product to my profile. So the easiest thing is just go and copy the property. It returns payload with copied properties. Here in the configuration tab, you can see that we have a target and a source. So my target is profile, and now I just type in the dotted format where I want to put it. So it's properties private. Oh no, let's put it public product. Okay, and I will copy it from event, and this is properties product, I guess. I can copy more properties, but I will need just one. Debug and see what we have here. Product properties, and then just update the profile. Here we go. Let's debug it. Here we have, okay, no payload. Right now we have our event. Right now we have our payload with properties product, okay, and this is an updated profile. Let's go and see if it works. Here we go. Let's refresh our page, and here we go. We can see that our profile has now properties public product sunglasses. This is what I've sent here. Okay, I want to show something else, how the system is extendable. You can see this little plus here. You can type a module of a Python code, and we can extend the list of these actions. I have one action that I've prepared. This is a remote call. It's a very simple action. I'll just show it how it works. It's a simple class that extends an action runner, and as I said, the action has some internal state. This is information if it's in debug mode. What's the event? What's session? What is the session? What is profile? And what is flow and flow history? Those session and event are read-only, and profile we can change. It has run action that takes any number of input parameters. In the constructor takes a configuration file. In the configuration file we have set URL where the payload should be, how the data should be sent, timeout method, and in a run asynchronic function we have payload. Whatever comes into this node, this action will just send it. And here I just a regular information how to send it, where to put the payload. You can put it in the body or in the params. Here we have a request with method and URL. And one last thing is how to register this plugin. This is a specification of this plugin. It says that this is the module. I will just copy it. This is the class name. What's the input? The input is payload, and the output is response or error. And this is our initialization part. This is what goes to the constructor. Then we can change it in Tracardi. So this is method URL and payload in. And this is just the information how it should look like in a workflow editor. Okay, I'll register it, and you can see how it works. Okay. So just paste it. So we have a new section, integration. We have a remote call. You can drag it to the editor, double click on it, and you can see that it has a name, remote call. Let's go and see. In the code, remote call, description, sends request to remote API, sends request to remote API. It has inputs, payload, and outputs as response error. So this is all the information on the information we've defined here. And this is the most important thing. This is the initialization of a config editor. So you can click here. This is our method undefined URL and payload. So now I would like to send this information. Okay, everything should be clear right now. I have to configure this node, just debug it, and we have an information on error that it's not configured. So let's configure it. So I gave it a method get. This is a dummy endpoint, and it will send a payload in params. Let's debug it. Payload is not string. Okay, so we cannot send it like this. This is a JSON, so I couldn't serialize it into the string. Here we go, and we have got response. Response is okay. And this is the information. I've just created a dummy endpoint that returns some data, for example, about the temperature, and we can enrich profile with this data. So I can just, let's do something like this. Cut out this property. I need this property. Okay, from payload. Payload, this is the data that's coming from here. And we will just cut out content. Let's debug it. Here we go, we've got temperature, and now we can add it to profile. Here we go, just profile, let's add it to profile properties, public weather, okay, and not event. Payload, content. Let's see. No, temperature, content. Oh, maybe we won't be cutting out this. Just take from payload, content. Yes, content, and we'll have temperature. Okay, let's debug it. Here we go. Input, output the same. Let's save it. Okay, so this one copies payload content to provide properties, public weather. Debug it. Now we know what's the problem. This is the problem of the data schema. Means that profile properties public weather is of type of text. The value is not text. Let's try to fix it. Okay. Now it should be okay. So you can see this branch took this data. This branch just took this data. Let's go and see our profile. What's the profile ID? Here we go. This is the profile ID. Profiles. Oh, there's one profile. Here we go, public weather 24. So this is how you can integrate. This is how you can integrate data. This one just copies data from event, and this one takes some data from remote endpoint, copies it into the profile. Finally, with the new version of Tracardi, we have a new API documentation. Tricardi is API first approach, so it means that everything you can do in a user interface you can do via API. This is a page where you can see all the API endpoints. You can authorize. Once you've authorized, you can just browse and try different APIs. This one gets sources. Sources are empty. How to visit the page with API. This is the URL. Localhost/docs. Okay, that's it for the version 0.4.